Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikens from Big Mountain Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to build a loading screen for your app. And this is something that I had in a previous app, and I asked some of the viewers if they wanted to know how to build it, and I got a lot of responses saying they did want to know how to build it. So I'm finally, many months later, going to show you how to build this loading screen. Okay, here's what the loading screen looks like. And we're going to continue from where the project was, where I left off on the last video in this series where I use this Zelda application to teach a bunch of different concepts. Okay, so here's what the application looks like right now. And just right off the bat, I'm going to delete some things we don't really need right now, like these lines right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build that view first. And we're going to do that in our storyboard. Okay. Now this might be how you remember the application before. And with that loading screen, what I'm going to do is just add another UI view to the scene dock. And this area right here is called the scene dock. Okay, so let's stick another UI view in there. We can close this one for now. And let's just make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, now we're going to need an image. So let me add that. There we go. And I just want this image to stick to all the sides. So I'm going to set this auto resizing here. Now another option is I can use auto sizing. I could also set constraints too. And if I did it with constraints, I would have just set all 4 of these constraints right here. But auto resizing will work for now. So we'll stick with that. Okay, now we need our image. And actually, I shared this project with my patrons before. And I don't know if they noticed, but this image actually is already in the project. I just never used it when I built this project and did the tutorials earlier for YouTube. So we already have the image in here. So we're going to use that. Right there. Okay, and instead of scale to fill, I'm going to change it to aspect fill. Then that way, we're going to resize this loading screen to fit, different devices. So that's why I want it to be aspect fill. Okay, now you might have noticed from the animation, the image had rounded corners, and I used that with one of my designable files here, the uiview.animate. It allows you to set a corner radius on the image. So we're going to do that. And again, if you might know about these files, these designable X files, they're basically just classes that add extra functionality or make different properties more accessible with a custom class. And by using this interface builder designable, it'll render it right on the storyboard. And with these attributes on the properties, these interface builder inspectable attributes, that basically exposes these properties in the attributes inspector. And I'm going to show you how that works. So if we go back to the storyboard and I select this image here, if I go into the identity inspector, I can change the class here, uiview.x. And then let's go to the attributes inspector, and you'll see these extra properties now that are exposed under the category of image view X. The only one we're interested in is just the corner radius. So let's give it a corner radius of 30. And normally you would see it update right here, but what I need to do in this case is set the property clip to bounds, so it actually cuts off anything that goes outside of the bounds. Okay, so that looks good. And there's one other thing too. When we show this view, as a loading screen over our main view, I don't want this white part to show up, so I'm going to click on the view here and change the background to clear. Okay, good. So we have our image. And there might have been one other thing you might have noticed from the loading screen. when you saw the preview in the beginning of the video. And that is, you saw this kind of like this shine or reflection kind of like go up the image before it disappeared. And that is something I added with just a UI view and a gradient. So let's add that. Just going to add a UI view. And we'll have it start from the bottom. And yeah, we'll make it that big. And again, we're going to want this to be clear. And then we're going to add a gradient to it. The only thing is I don't think I have a custom control for the gradient, so I'm going to add that. Okay, so what I'll do is just add a file to resources here. And it's going to be a Cocoa Touch class. You usually want to take this when you want to take an existing class that Apple has already made and you want to add functionality on top of it. And that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to subclass the UI view, which basically means I'm going to add more functionality to the UI view. And I'll call it 3-point gradient view. Yeah, just create it right in there. All right, and there it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, this isn't really a tutorial on how to do IB designables or in how to use IB Inspectable. I do have other videos for that. So what I'm going to do is just paste in what I already have and just kind of explain to you real quick on what this class does. So again, IB designable attribute on a class allows it to render on the storyboard so you can see the changes that you're making. And then these IB inspectable attributes on these properties right here, the first color, second color, and third color, allow you to set these properties right in the attributes inspector. And because we're going to use a gradient, I need to override this layer class and return a gradient layer instead. Okay, every time I set a color, I want to update the view. So that's what this function down here does. And it basically gets the layer and casts it as a gradient layer. And then the gradient layer has these properties, colors, start point, and end point. So the colors, you can just put in as many colors as you want for a gradient. I only need 3. And then the start point and end point, these are kind of like coordinates on a grid. So basically it's saying, start from 0, 0, 0, which is the upper left-hand corner. That's where the first color will be. And then the last color, so the left point will be the X is 0, so it's on the left side. And 1 for Y means it's all the way down at the bottom. So it's basically a vertical gradient where the first color is at the top and the third color will be at the bottom. And then however many other colors you have will be evenly spaced in between. Since we only have 3, the second color will be right in the middle. All right, great. So now we have that class. Let's go back to our storyboard. Okay, so I'm going to select this view, and I want to use my new 3-point gradient view. So let's just start typing it in here. Then it shows up for our custom class. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the attributes inspector, and you'll see those 3 colors that we can set. So basically what's going to be is the first and third color will be clear. And the middle color I'm going to set to a white color. But what I'll do instead, let me make that a little bit bigger, is I'm going to add some transparency to this white color. So if you click on this part, you can bring up the color selector, and I'm just going to decrease the opacity to, yeah, maybe around 45. That looks good. Okay, and that's it. So this view right here, I'm going to animate going up to give it that effect like there's a shine to the image. Okay, it looks like we have everything. Now what I'm going to do is create some outlets so I can animate these things here. Okay, so I'm going to create an outlet for the view itself, and I'll just call it loading view. And then I also want to animate this view right here, this shine. So let's add that, and I'll call this a shine view. Okay, there we go. And what I want to do is I want to animate this right when this view loads. So I'm going to call it right here, show loading screen. Okay. Now this function, of course, doesn't exist, so I have to create that. This is kind of like how I normally program. I've been a Microsoft developer for a number of years, and for my job, I also use Xamarin. We have some projects in Xamarin, which uses Microsoft tools and C#, and then we also have some projects that are iOS projects where we use Xcode and Swift. So normally when I'm in the Xamarin and the Microsoft tools, you know, I program like this where I'll create a function name or a method and then have it auto-generate it for me. You know, like you can do refactoring and it will create this part for you, but Xcode's come a long way with its refactoring tools, but it's not quite like other development tools yet. So hopefully it'll get there. I have submitted a feature request for this. Okay, good. So we have our show loading screen. And what do we want to do here? Well, before we start animating, what I want to do is I want to resize this view. So, you know, like right now I'm using an iPhone 8, and this will work probably pretty good for iPhone 8. But what if it's smaller? What if it's iPhone SE? Or what if it's bigger? What if it's like an iPad? So basically the idea is while I'm out getting data and populating the table view, I want to show the loading screen kind of covering up the table view until the data is there. So let's resize the loading view first. And normally, let me just show you something real quick. So normally if there's a view in your scene doc and you want to show it, well, what you have to do, it's not actually part of this view down here. You know, here's this document outline right here. It's not actually in here. It's separate. It's in the scene doc, which is right here. So you have to add that manually. And you probably learned this from the previous video going through here, this Zelda application. So basically this is what's going to happen. I'm going to do a view.add subview. And we're just going to add it like that. And normally what I do is I center it in its parent view or its super view. So I just say the loading screens, the loading views center property is going to equal the views center property, like that. So that will, right now with just this code, it'll just load it right in the center with its existing size. So let's resize it so it fits and it looks good for any device size. And I'm going to do that by changing the bounds. Now you have two choices when you change height and width on a view. You can change the height and width on the bounds or on the frame. And if it's just the height and width, it really doesn't matter. You can change it on the bounds or you can change it on the frame. You might ask, well, what's the difference? Well, the bounds in the frame are similar because it has an origin that contains X and Y, and it has a size which contains the height and width. But with bounds, the origin, the X and Y property, is always going to be 0, 0. So it doesn't matter if you use frame or bounds in this case. So in this case, I'll just use the bounds. And we're going to get the width. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the view's width by going into bounds width. And I'm going to subtract 25 from it. So it's going to be smaller, a little bit smaller. Now there's something different here too. Notice when I set the property, I go through the size property and then the width. But here when I access the property, I don't go through size. The reason for that is because the width here, when you go through the size property, you can set it. It has a getter and a setter. But this width right here is read only. And I don't need to set it, so I can just access bounds.width. So I can just read the value and then subtract 25 from it. So that's why I'm not going through the size property here. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to set the height to the same as the view. Let's get a space in there. I'm going to set the height to the same as the view's height, and then I'm going to subtract 40. so it's smaller. All right, that's good. And we have the center, and then we're going to load it. Okay, there's more to do, but let's just run it and see how it looks right now. There we go. Okay, you see it has the nice rounded edges, and it's smaller than the view behind it. So things are looking good. Let's continue, and let's animate it. Now, one of the things I want to do is when I animate it, I want to fade it into view. So before I load it, or before I add it to this super view, or the main view, I'm going to change its alpha property to 0. Okay, and by changing the alpha property to 0, that'll make it transparent. Okay, now we're going to animate it back to 1, alpha back to 1. And we'll do it over 0.3 seconds. And that will give it the effect of it fading into view very fast. And I'm going to use this one because I want the completion handler. So the animation will occur over 0.3 seconds. And I want to change the alpha property to 1. There we go. Okay, I'm going to hit tab and then hit enter. And then this is your success property that tells you if the first animation was successful or not. And when it does finish, it's going to execute this code. And then I'll use this to execute the next animation. So it's going to be kind of like 3 animations, right? So first we're going to animate it into view, which is what we already have right here. And then we're going to animate this shine view up. And then we're going to animate the loading view as it goes away. We're going to have it slide up to the top, up out the top. All right, so let's just run this and see how this looks. It's really fast. Couldn't really see it. You know, there's an option. Here, let's just run it again. Let's get rid of it. Okay, let's run it, see if yeah, it's pretty fast. Okay, let's try something. On the simulator, one of the things that you can do is there's an option to slow down your animations. So let's do that. Let's go to debug slow animations, and then let's run this again. Yeah, it's nice and slow. Okay, so you see what's happening is the the application seems to be fading or coming into view as the loading screen comes into view too. So there's a way to fix that, and what we're going to do is we want to add a delay to the animation. And in order to do that, we need a different uiview.animate function. So let's see what we have here. Let's see what our options are. Okay, right here, this one. It has a delay, and that's exactly what we need. So we're just going to delay it a little bit so it doesn't look like the loading screen is already visible. Okay, so we still want the animation to last 0.3 seconds. The delay, let's try half a second. We're not going to have any options, and I'm going to hit enter. This is where our animation will go. And actually, we could just let's just delete this code in between. There we go. All right, now let's see what it looks like. Oh, I just realized this. Yeah, the slow animations are still on. Okay, but this is good. So everything loads, and then your the loading screen comes up. That's fine. Let's turn off the animation. I can hit Command T, but if I hit it, you guys won't see what I'm doing. And then let's close it and run it again. Come on. There we go. New simulator. Yeah, that looks fine. That's perfect. All right. Now, let me show you one other thing here. I don't know if you notice this, but see this shine view? Notice it's kind of like it's too high up compared to this. That's because I resized the view, but this shine view didn't change its position to stay at the bottom. And that's because we didn't set any constraints. I'm just going to use the auto resizing here. Actually, let's just use this right here. So basically, as you can see from the preview, it's going to keep the shine view at the bottom, and it's going to, when I resize the loading view, the shine view will also resize inside of that container with these auto resizing constraints. You can see that arrow that allows it to resize all the way across. So in this one right here, we'll keep it at the bottom. And let's just run it again to make sure it's at the bottom. And that'll be the next thing we animate, is that shine view to go straight up to the top. Yeah, that's good. So now it's at the bottom. All right, perfect. So step number 2 is we want an animation so it goes right up to the top, and we're just going to use another uiview.animate with duration. Yeah, let's just use the same one here. Let's give ourselves some more room. And for this animation, I'm going to have it last 1 second, and I'll give it another little delay, just like 0.2 seconds. So it shows up, and then the shine goes up. For options, no options. Then I'm going to hit enter, and this is where we're going to add our animation. So we called it shine view. And to move it up, I'm just going to use a transform instead. Now there's a couple different options that you can use when you move things around, you animate, you move things around. I can add a bottom constraint and then change the value of that bottom constraint and animate the change on the screen. That's definitely one option that you can totally do. Another thing that you can do, I've seen Apple do this, which I kind of think it's strange, is they give 2 constraints in code. Like I've seen them do this before in one of their WWDC talks. So they give 2 constraints, in code they write 2 constraints, but they only have one of them that's active. And then when they want to move something, they deactivate one and activate the other one. And then in the animation, they do layout if needed, and that can also animate the moving of an object. I've never done that before. A transform will work fine in this case. So let's do that. And a transform is basically, you have 3 different options that you set through CGAffine transform. And I know I've gone through this before. If this is your first video that you've seen, I'll just give you a little description of what CGAffine means. Well, first of all, CG is core graphics. That's kind of like how Apple creates namespaces for their objects. So there's a core graphics namespace, and under there, they have a affine transform. And affine is basically when you manipulate an object, but you preserve the parallel relationships. That's kind of, it's a math term, right? So, like it says in this description, it's a 2D graphic. So there's only 3. It's pretty simple. There's only 3 transforms that you can do. And they are right here. You can rotate an object, you can scale it, make it bigger, smaller, or you can do a translation, which is basically, think of a translation as a reposition. It has an X and a Y, so you can tell it to go to a new X coordinate or a new Y coordinate or both. And that's what we need. For X, that means going from like right to left. We don't need it to go right to left. So we're going to keep that as 0. But for Y, we want it to go up. So what we want to do is subtract from its existing Y by like 800. Some high number, so it goes up. And that should work. For now, we're not going to put anything in the completion. Let's just test what we have now. There you go. Let's slow this down. I want to see what happens again. Let's rerun it. I thought I noticed something funny with that shine view. Okay, there's the loading screen, there's the shine view. It goes up. Okay, when the shine view went up, you notice it went outside of our loading screen. And that's basically because we probably don't have clip to bounds turned on our view, our loading view. So let me show you something here. Yeah, right here, clip to bounds. So basically what that means is, a UI view can allow other views its own subviews, which means views inside of it. It can allow them to show up outside of its boundaries by default. But we don't want this this subview, this child's view of his, to go outside of its boundaries, to render outside of its boundaries. So I'm going to go back to the parent view here and add clip to bounds, and then that will prevent it from rendering outside of the parent. Yeah, you'll see the difference once we run it again. Okay, and then it goes up. When it gets to the top, it shouldn't go outside of it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's better. Okay, so on to the last step, and that is basically just showing or hiding the loading screen. Okay. Now, another thing that you can do, you have an option if you want to refactor this, is you can put this into its own function. Then that way, if you ever want to change the order of these animations, it's pretty easy to do that. So I'll just do that real quick, and I'll call this animate shine view, like that. And we don't have the function, so we need to create it. Okay, there we go. Now what we want to do is we want to hide loading screen. So we'll call a new function here, and let's create that. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed this subtle animation in the original preview, but what I actually did, there's actually two animations happening when it hides. I have it come down a little bit, it bounces down, and then before it springs up and out the top. So there's actually two animations there. So the first one is it's going to bounce down a little bit, and for that I use spring with damping. It's a spring animation, it gives animations some bounce. And we just have to find it. Okay, it's this one right here. You can't see it because they cut out the center here, but you have to read up in the description. You want the one that says physical spring. Motion of a physical spring. Okay, and that will be very fast when it bounces down. So I'll just do it over 0.1 seconds. There will be no delay. And for how much spring you have, I like to start right in the middle. The valid values here are between 0 and 1, so 0.5 is right in the middle. For velocity, Apple recommends starting with 0 or using 0, so I usually just start with 0 for the starting velocity. It works for me, like in 90% of the cases, so these are my defaults. Okay, do we want any options? I don't think so. And our animations, we're going to do another transform on it, and we're going to for the movement. So we want to move it down just 10 points. And to reposition, you want to use the translation. And the X will be 0 because we're not going to move it right or left. We're just going to add 10 to the Y position. So it's going to go down. And that should work. So after it goes down, now we want to animate it going up. And for this, I think, we could just use a simple animation. We don't need a completion handler because we don't want anything to happen after that. So we'll just animate it over 0.3 seconds. And for this, we're going to use the transform again to reposition it above the screen or outside of the screen. There we go. We're not going to move it right or left, so we'll keep the X at 0. And for the Y, we'll make that -800, just like the shine view. Okay, let's see how that looks. And before I run it though, I want to change this, turn off the slow animations, just to see how it looks. There we go. You saw it go down a little bit and then it zipped up off the screen. Okay, now before what I was saying was, normally you want a loading screen to kind of like let the user know that something is happening. You're getting data, please wait. And you want to get rid of the loading screen once you have all the data. So that's not really happening right now because we hide it as soon as we're done the shine animation. So instead, what you can do is just comment this part out and actually just copy that line. Normally what you want to do is go find where you're loading your data right here, and then when your data is done loading, then you want to hide it. And I think in this project we added a delay to kind of simulate like a real world scenario where it's going over your network, it's getting data and it's coming back. Let me just verify that. Let me look at the get data here. Yeah, it's sleeping for 2 seconds. Okay, good. So let's just see how that works. It should go away only after the table view is done loading. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty much the same in this case. I think you'll notice a difference more. Like if we change this to 4 seconds, and then you'll notice it'll stay on there longer after the shine view is finished. It'll stay on there longer and then go away after the table is done loading. So 4 seconds. Yeah, there you go. All right, great. So there you go, guys. You learned how to create your own loading screen. So if you have an app that maybe takes time to get data, or you're doing some kind of intensive process where there's a delay, you could show your own loading screen with some kind of animation. That will just kind of like make your app look more active, let the user know that something is happening. All right, thanks. Hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and consider sharing it with your friends. If you have any suggestions, I really like your suggestions. Some of the people come up with some really great ideas, better and faster ways that I could do this, and I love hearing them. I love learning from you guys, as much as I love teaching you guys too. So just keep that in mind. Feel free to share any of your ideas. Even if you're a beginner programmer, you still have valid, great ideas. All right, thanks guys.